Now we reach the crucial bridge. How does Kant move from ethics to politics? How does the categorical imperative, operating in individual moral decisions, translate into principles for legitimate political order? Kant's answer is systematic and rigorous. If human beings have dignity based on rational autonomy, then political institutions must be structured to respect that dignity. This isn't just prudent or convenient, it's a moral necessity, a categorical requirement of justice. Kant distinguishes between internal freedom, moral autonomy, the capacity to govern yourself according to moral law, and external freedom, independence from being constrained by another's choice. Politics concerns external freedom. Government cannot make you moral, that's impossible, because genuine morality requires acting from duty rather than compulsion. But government can and must protect your external freedom, your ability to act without illegitimate constraint from others. The principle of right, Kant's fundamental principle for political philosophy. Any action is right if it can coexist with everyone's freedom according to a universal law, or if on its maxim, the freedom of choice of each can coexist with everyone's freedom in accordance with a universal law. This is the categorical imperative applied to external actions rather than internal motivations. Your freedom is legitimate only insofar as it's compatible with equal freedom for everyone else. This immediately rules out coercion, violence, fraud. Any action that constrains others' freedom cannot coexist with universal freedom. From this foundation, Kant derives three essential attributes that define Republican government. First is freedom or independence. Every person has the right to external freedom, independence from being constrained by another's arbitrary choice. No one can legitimately compel you to act according to their will rather than your own. This isn't unlimited freedom. Your freedom is bounded by others' equal freedom. But within that constraint, you're sovereign over yourself. No one has natural authority over you. Second is equality. Every person has equality before the law. No one has authority to bind others except through law that binds everyone equally. There are no natural masters and slaves, no hierarchy of status that gives some people special rights over others. This doesn't mean equality of wealth or social position. Kant doesn't demand economic leveling. It means equality of legal standing and equal subjection to law. The law applies to rich and poor, powerful and weak, the same way. Third is civil independence. Every person has independence in the sense of being his own master, having legal personality, the status of citizen rather than mere subject. You participate in legislation rather than merely obeying commands. This third attribute is most controversial, and Kant restricts it somewhat, excluding women, servants, and workers without property. Restrictions we would reject today, but that were common in his time. But the principle remains. Legitimate government requires citizens who participate in creating the laws that bind them. Here Kant makes a crucial distinction that separates him from Rousseau. Republican doesn't mean democratic in the sense of direct democracy, where all citizens assemble to vote on everything. For Kant, Republican government has two essential features. First, representation. Unlike Rousseau, who insisted sovereignty cannot be represented, Kant argues that representation is necessary and legitimate. In any state beyond the smallest scale, citizens cannot continuously assemble. They must be represented by legislators. Second, separation of powers. Following Montesquieu, Kant insists that legislative, executive, and judicial powers must be divided. But Kant grounds this in moral necessity, not just prudence. Concentration of power inherently threatens to treat citizens as mere means rather than ends. Why does Kant break with Rousseau on representation? because he witnessed the French Revolution and its terror. Rousseau's vision of direct popular sovereignty, Kant believed, too easily degenerates into mob rule, where passionate majorities violate individual rights. The very attempt to implement absolute popular sovereignty can lead to tyranny. Kant wants constitutional protections, deliberative representation, institutional stability. These aren't obstacles to legitimate government. They're necessary to ensure government actually respects dignity, rather than just claiming to represent the people's will. Like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, Kant uses social contract language, but with a crucial difference. He doesn't think there ever was or needs to be an actual historical contract. The social contract is what Kant calls a regulative idea, a principle for evaluating legitimacy, not a historical claim. Government is legitimate if it could be consented to by rational beings who respect each other's dignity and freedom. This is the test. Could this law, this institution, this governmental action be accepted by free and equal rational persons as consistent with their dignity? If not, it's illegitimate, regardless of whether people actually consented historically. This solves problems that plagued previous social contract theories. Locke struggled with the fact that most people never explicitly consented. Rousseau's actual general will was impossible to determine. Kant says we don't need actual consent or actual general will. We need possible rational consent, what rational beings would accept if reasoning correctly. This framework has profound implications for political legitimacy. First, government cannot pursue any goal, even seemingly good goals, in ways that violate dignity. You cannot enslave some for others' benefit. You cannot suppress speech to avoid offense. You cannot coerce religious practice even to promote virtue. Any action that treats citizens merely as means is illegitimate. Second, government must be constitutional, bound by law, with power limited and divided. Why? Because unlimited power inevitably treats some citizens as mere means. Constitutional limits aren't optional prudential devices, they're moral requirements. Third, government must allow public use of reason, free speech, press, assembly. Why? Because rational beings must be able to think for themselves, critique authority, and participate in public discourse. Suppressing this treats citizens as perpetual children rather than autonomous adults. Fourth, laws must be public and rationally defensible. Secret laws or policies that couldn't withstand public scrutiny failed the test of possible rational consent. If you can't publicly justify a law to those it binds, it's illegitimate. Fifth, punishment must respect dignity. Kant notoriously argues for retributive punishment. Criminals should be punished because they deserve it, not merely to deter others or reform them. Why? Because using criminals merely as examples for deterrence or objects to be fixed through rehabilitation treats them as means. Retributive punishment, paradoxically, respects their dignity by holding them accountable as responsible, rational agents. This doesn't mean punishment can be unlimited. Even criminals retain dignity. Torture, degradation, disproportionate punishment all violate dignity. But punishment proportionate to the crime respects the criminal's status as a rational being responsible for their choices. Notice how Kant transcends his predecessors. Hobbes gave us absolute sovereignty justified by the need for order. Kant says, no amount of order justifies treating citizens merely as means. Locke gave us natural rights and limited government justified by pre-political entitlements. Kant says rights aren't just pre-political entitlements, but requirements of respecting rational nature. Rousseau gave us popular sovereignty and the general will.
Kant says even popular will must respect individual dignity. Majorities can't legitimately violate rights. Montesquieu gave us institutional architecture. Kant says these structures aren't just prudent, but morally necessary to respect autonomy. Kant provides the moral foundation that grounds and limits all political authority. Government isn't just about power, order, contract, or will. It's about respecting the dignity of rational, autonomous beings. And that places absolute limits on what any government, however structured or however popular, can legitimately do.